Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Andrea and this is Beyond the Pink Door, and today we're standing in my shop Beyond the Pink Door. So we have a much requested video coming up today. I'm very excited to have done this, and it is for the wonderful Sandhill Sling by Noodlehead Patterns. This is definitely my favourite bag of all times to have made from Noodlehead so far. As always, all the pattern pieces slotted together beautifully, just always a joy to make. So this is my third one to make, so I've picked up a few little hints and tips along the way, and I have shared them as much as I could in the video. If you've made yours and you have some extra tips from me, I would be thrilled to learn them as well. So the Sandhill Sling is just that handy little rucksack type bag, perfect for shopping, going out with the girls, dog walking, going on holidays. I find it really handy. It's got a front pocket here, that's where my passport normally goes. You can fit all your bits and bobs, so a bottle of water, your purse, you can fit an iPad in here. I have done, it's really super. It's got a strap around the back. I tend to wear it around the front a lot, so I find it really handy to be able to put things into and pick things out of. Really handy, and it's very secure when it's around the front as well. I wear it around the back as well, so when it's around the front it's on my left shoulder, and when it's around the back I tend to wear it on my right shoulder, and that will make sense to one of the little amendments I've made that I'll show you in the pattern. So I don't think there's anything more to say about it, apart from the fact that I absolutely love it, and I hope you enjoy the sew along. So without any more waffle, we'll just get on with the sewing. So I've got everything here ready to start making my Sandhill Sling. My pattern piece sheet. I've chosen my fabric for the outside. I've got lining for the bag. I like to have this nice and bright so that when I look into my bag I can see what's in it. Got a little piece of elastic for the inside pocket. Got 2 reels of thread, one to match inside and outside. I've got my bag webbing, so this is for the strap. I have 2 zips. This is for the outside pocket, and this is for the top of the bag. Ideally I would like the 2 the same, but I don't have them at the moment, but we'll work with what we've got for today. And then I've got my bag hardware, so I've got a triangle clasp, I've got a swivel hook, and I've got a strap adjuster. And then I've got my interfacing. So this is a fusible fleece interfacing. It's just for the outside of the bag, and I will be showing you how to use that today. So I'm going to get my pattern pieces ready and we will start cutting out. I've got all my pattern pieces here. I've got the main panel. I've got the gusset top and the gusset bottom and sides. Then we've got the pocket on the front, so that's the bottom part of the pocket. We've got the top of the pocket, and we've got a little zipper cover, and you can use this or not use it. We've got the shoulder connector, and we've also got the strap holder, and then we have an interior pocket for the lining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate these into what is for the outside fabric, which is basically all of these apart from the interior pocket. And we also have one extra little piece which is not to be cut out in the fabric, it's just to be used later, where we're going to round off the corners of this rectangle. So that's just like a little template, so we can put that to one side. So I'm going to grab my fabric now and lay out my pattern pieces. So I've laid out all of my pattern pieces. Quite a few of them have to be cut out on the single and then some on the double. So the main panel, we're going to be cutting 6 of these in total, so 2 from the exterior 2 from the lining and 2 from the interfacing. Then we have our shoulder connector, we've got 2 of those. We've our front pocket, that is also going to be cut out in interfacing and lining, zipper top, zipper cover, bottom gusset, and then we have the top gusset here, which I'm cutting out on the double as well. So I've just been mindful that all of my grain lines are going in the same direction, and this is particularly important if your fabric has a pattern, so you want to make sure that all of your pattern pieces are facing the right way up. And if you do have a pattern that you want to fussy cut, then you can take a little bit more time matching up maybe your front pocket and the top if you want them to actually match. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut those out. So I've all my pieces cut out of my main fabric, and I've gathered them here on the interfacing, and I'm just having a look to see which ones need to be cut out on the double. So I have my main panel here, got my shoulder strap, and then I've got my gusset. So I always tend to leave my pattern pieces on my pattern pieces on my fabric. I do that when I'm dressmaking, I do it when I'm making bags, and it's just easier to identify pieces. And then if I have for any reason missed out on one of the markings, I can very easily put it on. So I'm going to cut them out one by one. Now I am a scissors user. I know that if you're used to using a rotary cutter, it's far easier to cut these with a rotary cutter. But I've tried and not been friends with rotary cutters, so that's those 2. Now I'm on to my top gusset, and I've got 2 of those. So you can see the idea, just making sure that I'm cutting out the correct pieces the correct number of times. And then I have my zipper pocket, and also trying to use my interfacing to the best of least waste. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and then the next thing we are on to is the cutting of the lining. Now we've our lining fabric ready. I have it on the double for the moment, and I've got all my pattern pieces here. I don't need the shoulder strap connector piece this time, and I don't need the zipper cover, but I do need everything else, plus I have the interior pocket. So the interior pocket and the main panel and also the top gusset are all on the double. So the fabric is double. I have my main panel here. I'm going to put my interior pocket above it because I need 2 of those. And then I'm going to put my top gusset here, and everything else then is on the single. So I'm gathering up pieces here as I go, and I'm just re-pinning. And I'm just going to cut around these again. When they're all cut, then I will check the accuracy, just to make sure that the pieces aren't getting bigger as I'm cutting them, if you know what I mean. So lots of pins. I've got quite long ones for these. They're these cute little ones with a button on top, but I just quite like the length of these because they go through all of the pieces, including the fusible fleece. So I'm going to cut those on the double and then come back to these other ones. We've got our pieces cut over there, and then we're on to the bottom gusset, the zipper top and the zipper bottom. Now, if you've made this before or you've read through the instructions, you will see that it doesn't ask for lining for the zipper pocket top, but this is just one of the little amendments that I've made to how I make this bag, and I'll show you as I go along why I've done that. In fact, I'm going to grab one that I made previously. So here it is. Here's the pocket, here's the zipper, and here's the little cover on it. And the reason I have added a lining is that on the actual pattern there is no lining in this piece because this panel at the top is actually sewn down to the front. So in effect then what you have with your bag is, I'm going to pin this just down here to demonstrate. What you have then is you have this piece sewn down, and then you get into your pocket like so. But I just found that that was actually quite difficult to open the zip, number one, and also it was a bit more limited for getting things in and out of that pocket. Whereas when that was open, I just felt I had like more access to it. So if you want to make it like the pattern says, absolutely 100%, but I just found that this actually worked better for me. So that's why we're cutting out a lining for this top piece. So I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to cut out those pieces, and then meet me at the ironing board to start the fusing of the fleece. So we're ready to do our fusing of our fleece. So this is my zipper pocket bottom. My fabric, my fleece, and my lining. I'm just going to give this a quick little run over with the iron. That's it. And here's my fleece, and you can feel on one side of the fleece you have like the bobbly bit, so you know that's where the adhesive is. So we're going to place that bobbly bits adhesive part down on the wrong side of the fabric. So centering it up there. And then I have a pressing cloth here, and you can see that it's quite wet. It's not just damp, I've actually wrung it out in under water. So I've wet it and then I've run it out, so it's not dripping, but it is actually, it's quite wet. So I'm going to lay that on top of my fleece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my iron on top for 15 seconds. So there we go. I've just counted my 15 seconds, and you can see that it's actually dried the pressing cloth. So I'm going to continue that all over my fabric. So I'm holding the iron on top. I can't let go of this iron because as soon as I do, it raises up. So I have to hold on to it. Counting my 15 seconds, so set up a 15 seconds on your phone if that works for you. I've lost count here, but I'm going to check it and make sure. So it's pretty easy to know which parts you've done, because they will have become dry. So I think you probably get the idea now. I'm not moving the iron around, I'm just holding it in the one position for the 15 seconds. And then I have my last piece here. And I want to hold it for 15 seconds just so that I can show you when it's actually finished. And it's very important to hold for the 15 seconds. Anything less could still have little bubbles on the outside of the fabric. So I think that's about 15. And then I'm happy with that. When you look at the outside, if you've got any little bubbly parts, you can just repress it. So go to a wet part and just repress it again. So I'm going to continue on and interface all my pieces like that. I've been careful as well that I've made sure that my fabric is still in the same direction as I cut it out. So I feel that's done now. I'm going to put my lining piece there, and then I'm going to pin my pattern piece back on. So I'm going to pin it in a corner here. I don't want to pin it in the middle because I don't want to leave marks on my fabric. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some clips so that I can clip my pieces together after I've done them. So we're at a sewing part at long last after all of that pressing of interfacing, so it's quite nice to be at this point. We have the zipper pocket bottom here, we've got the zipper pocket top, and we've got the zipper cover. We've also got our zip. I have some pins, so we're going to leave the lining out of the way just for one tick. Grab your zip. It will be longer than your pocket. The instructions ask for a 25 centimetre zipper. Mine is actually a 30, it's just what I happen to have in my stash. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sandwiching our zipper between our outer layer and our lining. And according to the instructions, we have a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to sew here. So I'm going to bring my zipper down. Maybe it's probably about 2 millimeters. So apologies now, we're going to be talking in a mixture of centimeters, millimeters and inches. It's just that the noodlehead patterns are actually all in inches, and my sewing machine is in centimeters, so I'll try and do a little bit of both. But I'm just bringing it down because I don't want, when I go to sew my zipper in, that I'm sewing too close to the teeth. So you can just see there, it's just marginally down from the top. Now I am going to show lots of sewing today, but this process here is, I have to sew just to hold the zipper down to the top one, so it's just like a basting stitch. So I'm just going to shoot off, sew that with a long stitch and then come back. So there you can just see there, it's quite a long stitch, just literally a basting stitch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab our lining. This is a cotton yarn dyed fabric which is identical on both right and wrong side, so that's really handy. And I'm going to keep my top edges together, and I'm going to pin it right on top. And then we're going to sew that with a 3/8 or almost a centimetre seam allowance. So I'm going to change my foot to my zipper foot. Now I'm filming on 2 different cameras today, so apologies if the sound is different on each of them. So I'm setting this up so that I have an almost 1 centimetre seam allowance. So there we go, that's what it looks like, and what we're going to do now is we are going to press this seam flat, and then we're going to go back to our sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along here. So I've just changed back to my normal foot and I'm just top stitching along. And that's how it looks. Now we're going to grab our zipper cover and we're going to press it lengthways in half. And then we're going to pin that on top of the other side of the zipper, edge to edge. And now, like we did with our zip, our first seam, we're going to baste along that to hold it in place. There we go. And then we're going to grab our zipper pocket top. And then that's going to go on top of that. And again, we're going to baste that in place. This is how we look. So we're going to turn it over, and this is where the my method changes to the Noodlehead instructions. We're going to pin the lining piece, which, as I explained to you earlier on, is the extra piece. I'm going to pin that on, and then using again the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, or almost a centimetre, we're going to sew across there. So I've popped my zipper foot back on and I'm going to sew along here. So this is how we're looking. I've pressed my seam up and there it is. So now it's time to open our zip into the middle of our pocket, and then we're just going to pop a pin here and we're going to sew along the edge here and just trim off this extra, and we're going to do the same on this side. We're just going to stitch over that and take off the extra. Now, normal foot back on again, and just like a basting stitch over the edge here, just so that we can trim off the extra of the zipper. And the same on the other side. Now grab your main panel and just grab one of them. Now this panel is going to be completely covered by the pocket. So if you really like the panel for the back, use it for the back, but yeah, just decide which is the front, which is the back. And just line up all your edges. Now, I always find that no matter how I do this and how mindful I am with the seam allowances around the zip, my piece always ends up a little bit bigger than my front. So you can see there, it's about a centimetre. So I guess it's where the zip teeth are in the middle. So I'm going to line up my top edges here, and I'm going to pin them together. And I'm essentially going to pin all around. Just down the sides. And I'm going to trim off that extra that's at the bottom so that the two pieces are the same size. And maybe there's something I'm not quite doing with the zip insertion, and if you've made this lots of times and you have any hints for me, please pop them into the comments. That would be great. And what I'm just going to do now is baste all around so that I just make this essentially one piece. So you can see there how the zip works now, and into your bag. Now we have our front basted together, so we're going to pop that out of the way for the moment, and it's time to grab our main zip and our top gusset. So we just want the fabric pieces, and similarly to when we did our pocket, we are going to go the right sides together. So I'm putting my zipper centered. Ideally you'd like a zipper a little bit longer than this, again just for ease of movement, and I'm pinning it along, and I'm going to sew it to the gusset using a 1 centimetre seam allowance. That's it, pinned in place. So here we are again with our zipper foot on. It's definitely a case of zipper foot on, zipper foot off at the moment. Looking at my 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm going to sew my zip in place. Now I'm going to just put my needle down, pull my zipper pulls back out of the way, so here we have our one side on, and we're going to do the same for the other side. So I like to pin it from this side this time, just so that I make sure that my edges are together. So seeing as our zipper is too big for our gusset, what we don't want to end up with is one side up here and the other down here. So pinning it from this side, I know the first time I made one of these I had to sew it 3 different times to get the two gussets together. So I'll just move those zipper pulls out of the way and we'll sew that seam. So this is how it looks. I've pressed the fabric to each side. I trim off a few threads. I'm not going to top stitch it now because I'm going to top stitch the lining to it at the end. If you're going to hand sew your lining, then you can do your top stitching now. So the next thing you want to do is grab your bottom gusset. There's our lining, we don't need that yet. And then we've got one piece of a bottom gusset. Now again, what I find is when I come to this, my top gusset is ever so slightly bigger. Again, I'm assuming it's down to the width of the teeth coming into the middle of it. And as I said previously, if you can give me any tips, please do. But what I basically do is, as you see I'm doing here, I pin this pattern on top of it, and I've centered up my zip in the middle of it, and then I'm just going to trim off that excess there. So there we have it, back trimmed to 4 inches. And now we're going to grab our bottom gusset and we're going to pin it over the short ends. And then we're going to sew across here using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It doesn't actually say in the instructions, but it says at the beginning of the instructions that unless otherwise stated, the seam allowance is 1/2 inch, which is 1.3 centimeters. So we're going to sew across there and there. So back to our normal foot again. And I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance guide here on my sewing machine. So I'm lining up to that. Now, even though I know the teeth are plastic on these zips, I'm still always fearful of sewing over, so I tend to like hand wheel over the zips a little bit. So what we'll do now is trim off the edge of the zip, just the extra bits. And then we are going to press that away and we're going to do our top stitching over that seam. So this is how it looks top stitch. So we're going to put that to one side as well. And the next thing we're going to do is grab our strap pieces. So we've got our strap, our shoulder connector, and actually just realised this when I was putting on the fusible fleece. We only want fusible fleece on one of these. So there we go. So here we have our webbing, and we are going to cut using our strap holder piece. So I'm just going to hold that in place and cut a piece off, and then using this piece and my little triangular connector, I'm going to just pop it through there. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew across there just to hold that together. So very simple. Next up are the adjustable strap holder and the strap, and we're going to literally just put the strap through there over the thing in the middle. I'm going to pull about 2 inches down. I'm going to just pop a pin in here just to keep that out of the way, because what we want to do is we want to turn up just a small amount, maybe what would I call that? It's not 1/2 inch, possibly about 1/2 inch. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew across there. So I'm going to do 2 stitch lines on this. I'm going to sew close to the edge, and then I'm going to sew about 1 centimeter higher again, and that will just enclose the raw edge of the strap. So we'll go to the machine and we'll do those 2 bits of stitching. So here we have it. Now this is just a basting stitch just to hold the layers together. And while that's there, I'm going to leave it in so that it will work as like a little hump jumper for the next bit, because I often find this is a bit of a struggle to sew the next piece. Now take my pin out. Just going to cut that little thread there in the middle and take those threads off, and then that sews nicely. And we're going to sew the next seam again. So again, I'm going to pop that just in at the back of my foot just to hold it up, because this is quite a thick piece. There we go. I am going to trim those threads off better. This is how it looks. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to get our swivel clasp. I'm just keeping this, I want to get to the right side of it. I want to put my clasp through, and then we want to thread back up to here. And we want to go in and then in again. There we go. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to grab our shoulder connector, and I want to pin the strap in a sandwich between the two of them. I'm going to put 2 pins through the strap because I don't want it to go wonky. And then what we want to do is we want to sew along the 3 sides of this shoulder connector. So along the long sloped side, across the top, and down the other side as well. And our aim for this is to have the intersection up here where the strap ends. So what I want to do is start down here, sew up, and you might see I've put a little dot there which is the edge of the strap. I want to sew across the strap to the next dot and then sew down to the end. And we have our 1/2 inch seam allowance again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in reverse again because I want this to be a good solid seam. And then down the other side. That's how it looks. So I'm going to trim off some of the fabric. I'm not actually trimming any of the strap. And then we want to turn this right side out. So we've got our strap made, we've got our gusset made, we've got our front with our pocket on it, and we've got our back, and that is all our main pieces used. So the next thing we want to do then is grab our little corner rounding template, and we basically want to round all the corners of the front and the back, bottom and top. So you can do this in a variety of different ways. You just put your template down. I'm not the best with a rotary cutter, but it works for this, and just go around. Or you can get your scissors, pin the template in place, and then trim it with your scissors. And you want to do that on all your pieces. So I'm going to do it with the scissors here on this part because this is quite bulky. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is to grab our back piece and then get our strap that we've made. And this is the right side of your strap up. And place the triangular piece, so the shoulder part, in the center of the top. Pin it in place. And then grab this guy, and on the pattern instructions it suggests that you put it down here at the bottom. You can put it wherever you like, but I find that if I put it here on the side, I find I wear this bag quite often at the front. I often wear it at the back as well, and I find that when this clips into it, that when I'm wearing it, it's just more balanced when it's here at the side. So I wear it using it on that side. You can put it on that side if you want to wear it over your other shoulder, or put it down the bottom as per the pattern, whichever suits you best. So I'm going to bring this to the sewing machine now, and I'm just going to baste these two pieces in place using a long stitch. So that's those basted into place. Just going to put all of those together and maybe clip them together so they don't keep moving around. And then what we want to do is we want to find the centre of the top and the centre of the bottom of the bag. So I'm going to do that very simply by folding it in half. I'm going to put a pin there, the top centre. I'll put a pin there, bottom centre. That's the back. I'm going to do the same for the front. And then I'm going to do the same for the gusset. So just bringing the two parts of the zip together there. This time I think I'm going to do a little snip. So, and this is so that we can line up the gusset around the bag easily. And here. Right, so I'm going to start with the front of the bag. Top of the bag, top of the gusset, because that's where the zip is. Now we're going to grab our little notch there, pin it to the top, and then our notch here at the bottom, pin it to the bottom, and then we're basically going to pin it all around, like so. Just doing a little walk through first. Okay, so we want to find the areas that are going to be the corners. So I'm going to pin it to here. Then I'm going to do just a couple of snips, not very deep snips, because our seam allowance isn't huge. And that will just make that move around that little corner easier. And the same down here. I'm just going to do a couple of snips around here. And then pin that around that corner. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So just when you identify where the corner is, Now we're going to bring that to the sewing machine and sew with our 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that's how it should look. So I'm going to start sewing on one of the long sides. And what I'd like to do is get to the corners and not have any little tucks or anything in it. We do have a lot of things to take into account here around this corner. I hope you can see it. Now I feel there's a tuck coming on there, so just stretch out my fabric a little bit. Yay, back at the beginning. So I'm actually quite pleased with that. I felt there was going to be a few tucks, but it's not too bad at all. It's the beginnings of one there, but nothing I can't live with. That's lovely. We do have a little one there, but I reckon if I just sort of give it a little bit of a stretch out, it'll disappear. And then basically what we're going to do is the very same thing for the other side, so very same method. Obviously this is our top and we want to make sure the zip is at the top. Match up our notches, clip our corners and do our next seam. So we can see how our bag is coming along here now. Very nice, very exciting to be this point. And so we're going to start doing the lining now. So I'm doing it very different to the pattern, only because I don't like changing the thread on my machine too often. So in the instructions, part way through you start doing the lining and then you go back to the bag and then you go back to the lining, and no, I don't do it that way. I like to just change my thread when I have to. It's enough to have to change feet on the machine. So yeah, we're going to knock out this lining now. So the first thing we have is our pocket, and we have 2 pieces, and we're going to sew right sides together just along the top, just along there. So we have our pocket pieces. I've changed my thread colour and I'm just going to sew across the top using the 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to press that with my iron. So I'm going to press that flat, and then I'm going to press it over in half, and we're going to come back then and sew a little channel along here for us to put in our elastic. So I'm pressed and back. I'm going to sew my next channel, my next seam, at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters, and that's because the elastic that I have is roughly a centimeter wide. So you can see there, I've just got a little gap there to put in my elastic. So I have my elastic and my safety pin, and I'm just going to thread it through. The amount that you tighten the elastic by is really your own preference. I find it handy to have the elastic in it because if I pop something into the little pocket, the elastic just sort of hugs it in and closes the pocket for me. So I'm going to put a pin there. So there it is flat. So I'm going to pull it in. Let me see, how long is that? That is roughly 4 centimeters. I'm going to just stretch it out to even the gathers, and then I'm going to just stitch there to hold it. And then the same on this side. Then cut off the excess of the elastic and put the safety pin away carefully. So that's how it looks. So I've just got one of my main pieces here. I've got my pocket. I'm going to pin them together here at the bottom. And then pin here along at the side. And the same here on the other side. And then I'm going to bring it to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste around to hold that pocket in place. So here's our lining piece with our pocket, and you can see here I've used my template to curve off the edges on the front, and I'm going to do that on the back as well, and I'm figuring that if I make it into quarters and do them all at the same time, it'll work because my lining is quite light. So you can see there, I'm not a natural with the rotary cutter, so we don't need that anymore either. So we have those two curved. Next thing we have to do is get our top gusset pieces and our bottom gusset piece. And what we're going to do is bring this to the iron, and just on one side we're going to press a 1/2 inch fold. So right along just one side of both. So we've got our 1/2 inch fold over ironed on both pieces, and what I'm actually going to do this time is I'm going to find the center of these, because we're going to be stitching these together the same way that we did the outer of the bag. So I'm just finding the center, giving it a little snip so it'll just make it easier for the next stage, and the same on the long piece, folding it in half. I don't know if you can hear that. I have no idea what it is. And a little snip. And a snip. Then we're going to lay out our bottom piece, and we're going to get our two top pieces. And we're going to do that seam that we did on the front of the bag, but we had a zip in the middle that time. So lay one there, and lay another, and we're going to have a little gap. You're going to notice a little gap there in the middle. Let's see if I can zoom in there. So you can see these edges aren't coming together, there's a little gap, and that'll all make sense when we go to add the lining to the bag. So we're going to pin that. That's what it looks like. We're going to do the same on the other side. And then using the 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're going to sew along there and along there. So a very straightforward little seam. That's how it looks. We're going to do the same on the other side. So here's our gusset. And we're going to use the same method that we used to attach the gusset to the main body of the bag. So we're going to find the centres on the top and the bottom. We're going to do the clipping of the curves in the corners. And yeah, we're just going to reproduce the same method and we'll have a finished lining then. So now we have a bag and a lovely lining, and this is definitely the most difficult part of the sew along coming up, and in difficult I mean to demonstrate. So I am figuring, I've tried a few different ways to try and get this all caught on camera. So what I have figured is that if we turn the bag inside out, I've still got my straps clipped. It's not difficult to do, just I want to show you as best I can. And then we'll turn the lining right way out. Now, one of the first things to mention is that we want the pocket with the elastic at the back of the bag. So identify that. There's the back. And we're going to put the bag into the lining. Now, I think that's all in the right places. So we can see our gusset seams there are lining up across there. And then what we want to do is hold the top of the bag like so. So you can see there where we've sewn on our strap connector. And then we have the top of the lining. And we're going to match up our little notches from the centres. I'm going to pin just as far as where the curve is. And over to here as well. We're going to do that in the front as well. So again, matching our centre notches. And we're going to sew these two together along the same line here that the lining has been sewn. And if everything matches up, that will be along the line here as well. So let's go to the sewing machine. Now just where the curve starts, now, and that actually lined up here with this stitching as well, and I'm going to do that then on the other side as well. So we've sewn our seam there. And now what we want to do is we want to push our lining piece up towards our zip. And pin it in place. And then down the side here. I've already done it on the other side because I was just trying it out with the camera angle. There we go. So everything is fully enclosed. What is a good idea now is to tack that in place. So tacking is not something I do very often, but it's definitely needed for this. So I've got a double thread. I'm just going to put the thread in here where the lining is and just bring it up to where I want to get started. Oops, there we go. I'm just going to leave the thread hanging out. I'm going to do a big awkward back stitch there because I want this thread to be easy to take out after my sewing is done. So I don't want it too neat. And then I'm going to do some long but then short stitches, so like your traditional tacking. So long and then a little short stitch. And I'm doing that all around, so around one side and then around the next. If you find that it's getting a little bit loose, then you can always do like a little back stitch on your next one. But this is only a very temporary stitch and I want to make sure that it's easy to take out when the sewing machine sewing is done. So I'm going to carry on and do that all around. Now this is basically how it looks. So it's all tacked down. I'm going to have to top stitch this next, so I'm going to turn it the right way out. I'm going to change my thread on my sewing machine so that the exterior fabric thread is on top. I'm going to leave the bobbin and then I'm going to top stitch all around here. So we're at the sewing machine again and we have some awkward positions to get into, but I've pulled the zip up a little bit because basically we want to start down here and we want to top stitch around. So I've taken the free arm off my sewing machine so I can get in here. Sorry about all the scraping, it's just the hardware of the strap. So okay, get in here. And let's get going. So it's a case of slowly does it. As I'm top stitching it, I'm making sure that the lining is not going out of the way behind the zip. It's a bit awkward getting around the corners, but just go little by little. Okay, let's see how that went. Okay, that caught in the lining all around, so that's good. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. So this is how it looks now. I'm just in the process of pulling out the tacking stitches, but yeah, I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. I have to get the stitch ripper at that for a few of the stitches, but yeah, very happy with how it's turned out overall. I'm going to give it a good press, so I'm going to get my tailor's ham and put it into the bottom of the bag there and give those seams a nice little press.